6010.
Hello and welcome to Fantasy Focus Football, presented by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. My name is Daniel Dopp, here with Stephania Bell and Mike Clay, who I've seen all week long. I don't really care about Mike right now, but Stephania, it is so great to have you here today. How you doing, darling?
Daniel, I'm good.
We are excited to be able to be here. We just did yesterday a huge part 1 breakdown of week 2. Go back and check that out if you're not able to listen to it. Mike and I went through a bunch of teams, but today we're going to get you lined up not only with a Thursday Night Football recap, which we'll get to in just a moment, but also the rest of our week 2 previews. First, though, I do want to promote Fantasy Football Now, Sunday morning, with all of the injury things going on, with all of the updates that we have. Make sure you check that out, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stephania, I know you're going to get us ready for everything, not just for that, but also with a little update on Field Yates' injury.
I know you might notice that we are not 4 wide today because Field is recovering from his surgery, but I have spoken with the patient, and I can confirm that he's doing very, very well. Nerve block's still in effect, so, we'll check back in another 24 hours. But big update for him today, he can shower.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank God for that.
So,
I've been waiting for him to have to be able to shower.
Believe
That's
me,
news I've heard.
Chapin's the happiest about that.
That's so good.
So, go Field.
You're the one that has to sit next to him on
the
Sunday.
desk.
You're the closest
I
to
know,
him, so
I know.
that's good for you, too.
Yeah, luckily I'm on the other side of the studio. We'll go check out Fantasy Football Now on Sunday mornings for all the latest. But for right now, let's get into it with a Thursday Night Football recap. All right, let's start with the positives here and the Buffalo Bills, because there's obviously a lot to dive into with this one, guys. But with Buffalo, holy smokes. Remember yesterday, Mike, when I was like, hey, if I'm going to take an anytime touchdown for any Buffalo Bill, it's obviously going to be Josh Allen, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then James Cook happened. And I did not expect any of this kind of production from James Cook. Love to be able to see what he did on the field. 11 carries, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns, plus a receiving touchdown. 1 catch for 17 yards and another touchdown, 28.5 fantasy points. Is this a sign of things to come, you think, Mike Clay, or is this just like good usage in this game?
Do I have to talk about this game? I'd rather not talk about this game. What is going on? Just bizarre. Yeah, I mean, look, we liked Cook. I mean, we all ranked him as like a good RB2, fringe RB1, and he's been awesome. He looks the part. He looked good running the football, found the end zone obviously 3 times. I don't know if he's going to be necessarily
in the first half.
Yeah, well, they didn't need to do anything in the second half. They just put it on cruise control in the second half. But I mean, spread the wealth, Josh Allen.
Right.
Come on, like Keon Coleman had no catches in this game after a pretty inspiring season opener. We still have Mac Hollins out there running a ton of routes. Very little Curtis Samuel. Khalil Shakir was solid last night after he scored in week 1, but. Yeah, it all went Cook's way. I mean, Josh Allen had a dud.
I was going to say, Josh Allen spread the wealth to yourself.
Yeah.
9.76 fantasy points.
That's brutal.
He never has duds. That's super rare. So definitely don't be worried about that. I know it's only week 2. Allen will be fine. They are a run-heavy offense now. They showed that in the second half last season. That's something that's going to benefit Cook. It's also going to benefit Allen to some extent near the goal line, but they don't throw it around like they used to. They have switched under Joe Brady around the midway through last season when Ken Dorsey was out the door, and they have carried that over to this season.
I thought, those were basically my 2 big takeaways. The fact that James Cook got a carry inside the 5 rather than it being a Josh Allen touchdown, I was thrilled to see that as a James Cook manager.
I do wonder if it had anything to do with the left hand, because you saw his left hand, he was wearing a glove, and if you saw, he had 2 fingers taped together. They call it buddy taping, so they're protecting the finger. And he did have one, we talked about ball security being the only real concern with the hand, and there was one fumbled snap where he was able to pick it up, but other than that, the hand wasn't an issue. I do wonder, though, if since he was making a dive close to the goal line when he injured it originally, if there was any consideration.
You gave me a new idea for a Halloween costume, buddy taping. Mike, maybe you and I can just go together as like a buddy taping.
All right.
We'll just duct tape each other to each other.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No?
All right, I'm in.
Sounds like you're not into that one. All right.
The other let's think it through. Let's workshop that a little bit.
The other big takeaway for me was everything that you just said, unfortunately, about Keon Coleman. Yesterday on the show, I was like, here's my tier of pass catchers that I trust. 1, it's Dalton Kincaid. That didn't work out.
Oh, yeah, that too.
2, it's Keon Coleman. That didn't work out. And then Khalil Shakir was the guy that got the most fantasy points.
Yeah.
To be fair, the Dalton Kincaid took a knee to the head when he went to the ground. And, he had gone to the ground, and then somebody just incidentally contacted him running over. It was knee to the helmet, and he was on the sideline after that.
Yeah. How do you feel like this is going to change? And obviously, when we get into rankings next week, we can dive into this a little bit more. But do you feel like this is going to change your pass catching hierarchy or trust in any of these Bills wide receivers?
I don't think so. Coleman still played quite a few snaps. Now, they did rest a lot of players down the stretch here, and I believe Allen only attempted 19 passes, a very rare low-volume game. They just had it under control. Cook scored all the touchdowns, which is almost never going to happen. It's just he's never going to – he probably won't do that again. He might not have a 2-touchdown game, maybe one the rest of the season. So that means other guys are going to score. Coleman's going to get his when they throw more passes. But look, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like last year where the Bills are behind so often and playing catch-up down the stretch. I mean, they look good. I mean, I don't know when I'm going to learn my lesson to, with underestimating the Bills. Like, I love Sean McDermott. I talk about how he could be the difference because how he coaches these guys up. But I just seem to consistently still underrate them because their roster is like they lost a lot of good players in the offseason, including recently from injury. Matt Milano, I was really concerned about this team, especially after they barely made the playoffs last year. And it looks like a giant L because McDermott has coached them up. Allen's a superstar, and they just keep getting the job done. They clearly are not getting like anything out of their receivers, and it doesn't matter. They're still just crushing good teams. Miami is a good team, and they just crush them.
Yeah, that was very frustrating for all of my Dalton Kincaid shares. Hopefully, again in week 3, we get back to the Dalton Kincaid we saw in his rookie season, but still not going to panic given how good this offense is. If you tell me that there's an offense that my tight end is on that's going to score 25, 30 points a game, I'm still in on that offense.
By the way, he had, what did he have, like 4 catches in the game? That might be one of the top producing tight ends of week 2. After what we saw last season, that might be great. You might take that all day long.
All right. On the other side of this one, Stephania, obviously we need to start with what happened to Tua Tagovailoa. It was a really rough night out there leading up until the injury, and then obviously he goes down with concussion. What do we know about him?
Well, if you saw the play, you saw when he led with his head, he was trying to gain yardage for the team and just went in to contact the way we hope players don't ever go into contact, kind of head first. You saw his neck get bent sideways. The contact was made with DeMar Hamlin, who is a starting safety for the Bills last night. And he just went down to the ground immediately, and people noticed what we call a fencing response, the bald fist, arm in the air, an involuntary neurological response to a brain injury. And so that creates a somber mood immediately. You saw the medical staff rush to his side. He did walk off the field, escorted by the medical staff, very quickly went to the locker room for evaluation and was declared out within 6 minutes due to a concussion. So I'm sure there will be many conversations. There will be a lot of opinions about this. But the primary thing is that Tua has relationships with a number of concussion specialists. When he had his issues after the 2022 season, when he had multiple concussions, when he was taken by ambulance in Cincinnati after a scary injury, before he came back in 2023, he consulted with multiple concussion specialists and was cleared by a number of folks to be able to return at that time. So he will have the right people to seek advice from, for further evaluation from, but there's not going to be any decision made in the immediate sense. And I think Mike McDaniels, if you listen to the press conference afterward, was very clear that his focus was on the player. Yeah. It was not on what are the next steps. It was a day-to-day process from their perspective at this point. And I think we just have to respect how the process plays out.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. I hope you guys will join us in wishing Tua all the thoughts and prayers and positive vibes and good things, whatever you believe, however you put goodness into the world, sending as much as we can to Tua, because this is something obviously there's been a history of, and his health is obviously more important than any of the rest of it. So unfortunately, spinning that forward, Mike, having to talk about this from a fantasy perspective, the only thing that really stood out for the Dolphins, it felt like, was Devon Achane.
Yeah, no thanks.
And his performance.
Well, I actually do want to. I'll take that because he led the team in rushing, 22 carries for 96 yards, 7 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. 22 carries. He's never had that many carries in his young career, and we knew that he was going into the game, and as long as his ankle held up, he would get the work. But you didn't know how well his ankle would hold up. It's also noteworthy that Jeff Wilson Jr. left with an abdominal injury. It might be why you saw Devon Achane playing so much so late, and doing as much work as he did. So The good news is that his ankle held up.
Yep.
The tough news is that it was hard to know before the game what was going to be the workload.
Yeah,
29 touches.
Yeah, everything. He has 46 in 2 games now. I don't know. It's the same concerns we've had. Can he hold up on with this workload being utilized like CMC right now? He's basically being utilized like Christian McCaffrey. Can he hold up? There are still some concerns for him. I mean, he's averaging 3.8 yards per carry this season. That's 4 yards lower than last season, so the efficiency has dropped off there. But everything is coming up HN. The Mostert injury. Then Wilson goes down in the fourth quarter. The rushing efficiency hasn't been there, but the passing game work has been there because everyone's running this extreme too high to shut down Tyreek and Waddle. They've done nothing so far, so it's opened up perfectly for dump-offs to HN, who's wide open on like every play. Everything is coming up HN so far. He's been terrific, and he could potentially be a league winner if this continues, but I'm still worried about him being a small running back. Can he do this all season long? So we'll see how it goes going forward.
From Next Gen Stats, forced 9 missed tackles, HN.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, obviously wide receivers were tough, unfortunately, in this one. But listen, we'll be back with more of our Week 2 preview right after this. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, Mike Clay. Let's talk about some teams we got a preview here in Fantasy in Week 2, guys. Stephania, I got word from Adam Schefter while we were taping his podcast that he didn't expect him on Tuesday to be able to suit up in this one. I'm asking you now here on a Friday, do you think anything has changed with T. Higgins? Do you think we'll see him out there on Sunday morning?
It's going to be tough. I mean, he hasn't done anything yet. So we're Friday morning. Friday practices are always big. So when we record this, we're doing this in advance of players taking the field.
Yep.
But based on what we've seen so far, it's certainly not looking encouraging for T. Higgins.
Yeah, I don't love that for Joe Burrow. If you're going to tell me, I recognize, hey, we're taking on the Chiefs this week. So there's in my mind, probably negative game script. Probably going to have to throw the ball a lot because
we do like that, though.
Yes, we do like that. However, I still feel like I'm nervous about what it's going to look like without anyone other than Jamar Chase there. I know that we have Andre Yoshavas, but talk to me about how you're approaching Joe Burrow because I've still got him outside my top 12 at quarterback.
Oh, really? Okay, I have him QB 10, and I think it's going to be game script related. First of all, they were the game script adjusted pass heaviest offense of week number 1. That's a multi-year trend. They throw the ball a ton when Burrow is on the field. And, of course, they're underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs, which means they're just going to throw the ball even more, most likely, in the second half, unless they're somehow ahead in this game, which is hard to imagine after they just lost to New England in week number 1. So I think that's going to be good for Burrow's fantasy stock because make a list. Who's most likely to attempt 45 to 50 passes this week? Burrow's probably atop that list. And if he gets that volume, it's going to be a good day from a fantasy perspective. Also, Jamar Chase somewhat quietly played 83% of the snaps last week. You would expect him to be a full-timer in this game. Only 6 targets in that one, but that could potentially be as high as 10 or 11 in this game. So I think, feeling better. I like the sleeper appeal here of Burrow for like a bounce-back week, and I think Chase will get back on track as well.
I'll say this really quickly, and one of the reasons why I have him outside my top 10, looking back at last week, obviously 2 completely different quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. But Lamar Jackson, 26 for 41. 273 passing yards and a touchdown. If you take away Lamar Jackson's rushing ability, which you are going to do if you're trying to compare it to Joe Burrow, he only had 13 fantasy points through the air. And he still threw the ball 41 times. Like you're talking about, even if they have to throw it a bunch, I'm just worried that they're going to become one-dimensional. And I have a couple other quarterbacks I like more than that. If you're in a 10-team league and you don't have a choice, I get going with Joe Burrow, or a 12-team league. I've just lowered expectations, especially after what we saw with Lamar and how easily it felt like that Chiefs defense was able to help get to the quarterback, unfortunately. All right, Stephania, I do want to ask you about Jamar Chase, though. Is there any reason why you would be concerned about a guy? We got him back week 1. Didn't practice a whole lot coming into it, but now we're a full week into practice. Is this like, hey, full go, should be 100%, no concerns at all whatsoever?
Well, I think we're still working our way back. I think it's a progression. It's not like, okay, 1 game and you're done, but there is sort of the butterflies of the first game, the procedure of going through the dress up and get ready for the game element that he's had. I still think there's getting used to football and getting conditioned in a certain way. But Jamar Chase is still Joe Burrow's best option.
That's right.
Like that, the bottom line is that doesn't take that away. The main thing you're concerned about with these guys is soft tissue injuries. And I know I sound like a broken record there, but that is always what you're worried about when they're coming off of a layoff, if you will, and then not being in football shape.
Yeah, we're definitely starting Joe Burrow. We're definitely starting Jamar Chase. We're probably also still starting Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I would like a Cooper Kupp game out of Jamar Chase. Just he might get 21 targets. It might happen. I mean, in this game, if there's a game that's set up for that, it's this game.
It would be this game. I want to ask you about Xavier Worthy. On the other side, obviously, we're starting Rashee Rice. We're still starting, Travis Kelce, but only 3 touches for Xavier Worthy in week 1, but he had over 20 fantasy points. I kind of want to do a name game with you, Mike Clay, and ask you where you're at on some of these guys, and if you would start Xavier Worthy over them, okay? Tank Dell or Xavier Worthy?
I have Dell, I believe, slightly ahead. That's a close call, though.
Stephania, what about you? Tank Dell or Xavier Worthy?
Ooh, probably Xavier Worthy for the upside.
All right. What about George Pickens or Xavier Worthy?
Pickens is drawing a tough shadow this week, right? They have Denver, so I guess I'll go Worthy there. That's a close call.
Worthy. Okay. What about Terry McLaurin? Am I too far down the list? Is that the problem? Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper.
Yeah, McLaurin had a dud last week too. I might go. I think I have Worthy just ahead there.
Okay, so we're talking about Worthy as like a flex play here in this one, in spite of the fact that he only had 3 touches in week 1 because of that game-breaking upside that he has.
Well, also in your flex, aren't you usually swinging for the fences? Like that's to me one of the spots where
you started anyone from the Thursday night game, you are.
Yeah.
So anyone other than Devon Chan and James Cook, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I have him 34. He ran around on 74% of their pass plays in week 1. We still don't expect Hollywood Brown back, and even if he does surprisingly play, you would imagine he's going to be severely limited. So much like DeAndre Hopkins was last week for the Titans. So, yeah, I think Worthy is a viable flex because he brings you that big play upside. But we need more opportunities here. Like you said, well, 2 targets, 3 targets, 1 carry. We need more than that.
Stephania, are we going to see Hollywood Brown in this one or still TBD on his status for Sunday?
I think still TBD.
Okay. Obviously, if there's no Hollywood Brown, that could potentially open up some more opportunities, hopefully more than what we saw in week 1. But Xavier Worthy, because of that game-breaking ability, definitely a flex play in consideration.
The one thing I will say about Hollywood Brown is it's really a contact clearance issue. That's the main thing is he cleared? So I would say if Hollywood Brown comes back, like once they're okay if you take contact, it's not like, it's not like a Devon Achane situation or somebody coming off a soft tissue injury where, technically it is a soft tissue injury, but it's not like a muscle strain where you're worried, like if I overuse it, this would be a setback. It's more, is he safe to encounter contact? And once you're comfortable with that, you can deploy him as you usually would.
Let's pick this game. It's going to be pretty quick, I think. I'm going to take the Chiefs.
Yeah. Do you know the Bengals have, when Burrow's played, have won 3 out of 4 against the Chiefs over the last few years? So they've had success here. Maybe there's some upset appeal. But I'm going to go Chiefs. Yeah, it's in Kansas City, right? So yeah,
that's good.
I'll go Chiefs.
Taking Chiefs across the board in that one. Let's move ahead. Talk Colts and Packers. Stephania, Green Bay Packers have still not ruled Jordan Love out. A bunch of our fantasy managers have let us know that they're very upset about it in the game. Why can't I put him on the IR yet? Well, it's because the team hasn't done that, but we're not expecting Jordan Love to play, are we?
Doesn't feel like it. He hasn't practiced. I don't feel that way. And if you saw the scare that he had with that injury, but it's really about functionality. The fact that they didn't put him on IR, on the NFL IR, not our
correct.
IR, meant that they thought that he could beat a 4-week timeline, and it was projected at around 3 to 4 weeks, and potentially sooner. 1 week feels like that's asking a lot, but 2 weeks you might start getting intrigued. So I think if he's not practicing, we're not going to see him. But I think that way they leave the door open so that it's a little trickeration, but it's also let's just see how he feels day to day, and they're not lying about that.
All right. So we'll see. I'm still expecting, if I go into this and I've got any of these Green Bay Packers skill position players, I'm just going to expect in my head as a fantasy manager that Malik Willis is going to be under center. So if that changes, obviously we'll talk about it on Fantasy Football Now, Sunday morning. But Mike, how has Malik Willis changed your outlook for these Green Bay Packers?
Substantially. I don't want any Packers pass catchers in my starting lineup this week if Willis is under center. He's played 3 full games. He has 67 career pass attempts, 0 passing touchdowns, and he's never thrown for 100 yards in a game, 5.2 yards per attempt, 52% completion percentage. Not good raw stats, not good efficiency. They traded for him in desperation because they were unhappy with Sean Clifford as their number 2. This is it was like maybe the worst team this could have happened to, just considering their circumstances. Last minute, bringing in a desperation QB2, it's very much off limits. If I had to pick one, it would be Jaden Reed because I expect them to try to run the ball a ton, and he can run the ball maybe 3, 4, 5 times, much like Debo was used last week. Yeah, for the 49ers. So he would be the only one that has a shot, but otherwise you're playing with fire if you're playing with any of these guys.
I can't believe my life has led me to the point where I'm defending Green Bay Packers live on television, but that's where I'm at right now, and I'm in on Jaden Reed still, Mike. I've got him as wide receiver 28. Fields got him at wide receiver 27. That could be the painkillers that he's taken, though, for what it's worth. Mike, you've got him at wide receiver 36. Can we do a board bet here? You willing to do a board bet?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't care if I'm wrong. I will fade Packers receivers in this situation.
All right, so we'll just split the difference. I'm at 28. You're at 36. We'll say top 32 wide receiver. You good with that?
Top 32?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I say Jaden Reed will be a top 32 wide receiver in week 2.
I say Jaden Reed will not be a top 32 receiver in week 2.
Put it on the board. All right, if he's exactly 32, Stephania, you win that bet. That's
all right, then you got to start saying that better because you're saying you're top 32. That would be.
You're right.
32.
You're right. It would be top 31. You're right.
Okay.
You're right.
I like that rule, though. I like that kind of wild.
I like how, because it still gets you in on
because
that.
I still have an opportunity to
It's
win.
like landing on green when you're playing roulette, right? Isn't that how it works?
I saw you down in Bahamas.
Well, you know, a little bit of fun doing that. And Josh Jacobs, I think, obviously in this one, if you're going to roll with somebody, I mean, you can't not start Josh Jacobs based on where you drafted him, but if I am this Colts defense, I'm going to assume that I'm going to put as many guys in the box as possible.
100%.
1,000%.
Yeah, that's exactly what they'll do. But he had 18 touches last week, and this defense struggled against Joe Mixon at that huge game last week, so you're firing up Jacobs. And I did move him down because I think the offense will struggle, but the volume should be there.
When you look at these, on the other side, the Colts wide receivers, Alec Pierce was the guy that did all the dirty work last week, with that huge play. We're still in on Michael Pittman. Any reason why you wouldn't start Michael Pittman this week? Because he's the guy that feels like the safe option still in this Colts offense.
Yeah, chance of Jair Alexander's shadow. I don't think he will, though. It's kind of a tough call, but I would say we're good on Pittman. Josh Downs may play in this one.
Yeah, limited practice Wednesday and Thursday, coming off that high ankle injury. These are the ones that always make me nervous. Yeah. This is one of the ones when you come back, I do get nervous because all you got to do is get out there, twist it a little too much, it bothers you. Go up in the air for a catch, land funny, it bothers you. So it's touch and go. We don't know what his status will be again Friday morning. We're recording this. Let's see what he does in practice. But there is a possibility that he takes the
not buying on Pierce right now. He's just going to be one of them boom bust guys. Richardson loves throwing it deep, and occasionally they're going to hit for one of those. But there's going to be games where he has maybe 3 targets and no catches. That's just the way he's deployed. And A.D. Mitchell, you would think, would start to steal some of his reps as the year goes on.
I think you're describing Gabe Davis. Is that what I should expect for
less than a worse Gabe Davis? So probably not something you feel great about.
I'd be happy to speak A.D. Mitchell into existence, though, for what it's worth. We're all on that same bandwagon.
I've been singing his praises in all preseason.
All right, let's pick this game real quick. Colts or Packers? I'm going to take the Colts.
I'm going Colts, yeah.
Colts.
All right. When we come back, we're going to continue on our Week 2 preview. Stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, and Mike Clay diving into our Week 2 preview, Part 2. Like I said at the top of the show, in case you're just tuning in, if you want to listen to the Part 1 of this preview, go back to yesterday's show. Mike and I dove into a bunch of these guys to be able to talk about, a bunch of different games to talk about. But now we're talking 49ers. 49ers, Stephania, I put your helmet out for you as well, just so that you could feel
where's the Eagles helmet?
You didn't need an Eagles helmet.
Lions
you barely won that game. You don't get a seat at the table.
That's fair.
These were dominating.
Honestly, it just occurred to me, I don't know if we've ever been in this position where of our 3 teams, the Eagles are probably the worst.
I don't know, but I like it.
I don't like that at all.
Stephania, the question every fantasy manager wants to know. Christian McCaffrey, and if he is going to be available on Sunday, what can you tell us about CMC?
Okay, here we are again, Friday morning, like
10:23 a.m. right now.
All right, so I need something definitive.
Yeah. Well, last week we were definitive because everybody sounded positive, including Christian McCaffrey, who expected to get a full workload. I mean, everybody, all the beat writers who cover the team, all of the national reporters, everybody thought he was going Monday night, and then a surprise inactive. And it caused a lot of conversation afterward. But I think the reasonable take here is that this is how I look at it. You've got a player in Christian McCaffrey who said this week in the locker room that his mentality is, I'm going. That's how he approaches every week. Because he said, if you're on the fence, it doesn't give you a good mentality going into the game. So he prepares like, I'm going and I expect to play. And I believe that he probably gets into a little bit of headbutting with medical staff who are saying, well, we think we should hold you back, or even the coaching staff, if they say, look, we're looking to February, because, of course, the 49ers
games this
are
season.
expecting that, right? So they don't want him to go out there at 80% and then all of a sudden have a setback that means, okay, now we're missing you for a chunk of games that really matter, or you're compromised for the entire season. And this is going to be the tug of war until the time that he plays, and not just the first time he returns, but those first couple of games back where everybody's on pins and needles about, can he get through a game? Can he handle the volume of work without a setback? Listen, everyone, there's no way to know this fully in advance. Everybody's going to have to roll the dice a little bit, McCaffrey, the team, etc. As of right now, my feeling is that it's probably another week, because if he feels anything, unless he goes out, Friday's a big day for the 49ers, if he goes out and he's like, I feel fine, I feel nothing, and has a full practice, then we're feeling better about the weekend. However, part of this issue is, how do you feel 24 hours later? Because if he comes in the building Saturday for a walkthrough and they're like, how do you feel? And he's like, well, it was a little sore after, they're going to say, no, you're not going to play. So I think it will come down to the wire again. I think the door will be open, and I think we're all just going to have to sit there and wait. But they do know they have someone behind him, if he can't go, who can certainly carry the workload.
Yep. As it is right now, Mike, I believe that CMC has been pulled out of projections. We are ranking him this week, and part of that is because of everything that Jordan Mason did in week 1. Ranked as running back 11 for me after a massive week 1, 29 touches and 152 yards. He took 55 of those 57 snaps at the running back spot for that team. It feels like there's no one else behind him. I don't know if they're going to try and get someone else involved, but given what this game script could be, because I expect them, spoiler alert, to beat the Minnesota Vikings, game script could like totally play into another massive Jordan Mason week this week.
Yeah, no doubt about it. 28 carries and 1 target in that game. So the way I have it projected is fewer carries, of course. It's so rare for running back to get anywhere close to that number. But still could be 18 to 20, and then a little increase in target work, right? If it's a more competitive game or just in the natural way things go early in that game, he should probably get 2, 3, maybe 4 targets in the game. Minnesota did a good job against the Giants running backs last week. We're not really too worried about that right now, but Mason should be all systems go. I have him 8th. I'm actually very optimistic just because they didn't use the other running back. So, I mean, it's the 49ers, a highly productive offense. They're going to score points, you know that, and he's going to be the main guy. They just don't trust anyone else at this moment. So he might lead the position in fantasy points. Like, he's well positioned for a huge.
They're loving controlling. They controlled the clock. Look what they did against the Jets. I mean, it was just this time of possession thing. So if the run game is working, if they can be effective, and how they look up front, I mean, the blocking for the running backs is fantastic right now. So everything that they're doing speaks to a positive ground game, and Kyle Shanahan loves to control the time of possession. So I wouldn't be surprised if they find it's effective. You're going to see a lot of Jordan.
Who do they have behind Jordan Mason? Because obviously Elijah Mitchell is out for the season.
Garendo, the rookie, and Patrick Taylor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's why we saw so much Jordan Mason, I guess.
Yeah, Garendo is like one.
He played like 6 snaps at the most. Yeah, he barely saw the field. I don't think Taylor played.
Right.
All
right.
All Mason.
So let me ask you, Stephania, on the other side of this, if Aaron Jones is able to get some work done, do you think it's going to be in the passing game, doing the passing game work, or do you think it's what he's done recently, which has been, he's been an unbelievable rusher. Like, out of his last 6 games, at least 94 rushing yards. 5 of those games, he had over 100 rushing yards dating back to last season. Ding. I am curious. Sorry, that was a way back machine there. But how are you approaching Aaron Jones against your 49ers in this one?
So I loved what Aaron Jones did week 1, and we talked about his efficiency on the ground. Like, nothing super flashy, but he got almost 100 yards on the ground, and he certainly was effective for them. Just like the 49ers have been good on the offensive side of the ball, helping their running backs, they've been really good on the defensive side of the ball, control,ing the run game. If you saw Fred Warner, the captain of the defense, with that punch out on Breece Hall, like, I must have watched that. Admittedly, my bias creeps in because I'm such a big 49ers fan, but the timing of that punch out, Breece Hall is really good. That was just that you couldn't fault that. That was just brilliant timing on Fred Warner's part. They're all over the middle of the field. They're very good at controlling the run game. So to answer your question, I think Aaron Jones gets the bulk of the work. I think Ty Chandler touched the ball 9 times.
Yeah, he was pretty busy. I mean, I have a pessimistic take on Aaron Jones. I mean, I know I was down on him in the season because of his age. I
think this week is not
Yeah, that's part of it. Also, I mean, he was over 100 total yards, had the touchdown, 16 touches. It was against the Giants, which is something we have to consider here.
Yep.
Only played 53% of the snaps, so we did see a lot of Chandler. 8 carries, 3 targets. That's a lot of work for a number 2 back. So he was very much a factor. And you mentioned the Niners. 54 yards on 16 carries for Breece Hall in that game, 3.4 yards per carry. This is going from like what should be a light matchup to one of the hardest matchups for Jones, and he was splitting that backfield. So if you start Aaron Jones, you're kind of hoping that he kind of what you were leading there with Daniel, which is you hope he gets 6 targets or something and gets 50 yards, maybe finds his way to the end zone. But I have him down to 26. I'm pretty
I mean, I've been speaking about Aaron Jones all preseason, how much I liked him. But in this week, I have him on a couple of my fantasy teams, and I'm actually switching him out.
Yeah. This is one of those situations where if you have Aaron Jones, you're probably looking at him as a low-end RB2 or maybe a flex play, but with lowered expectations. I'm hoping that we see more passing game work. When you look at the run that he's had over those 6 games that we've been talking about, coming out of the playoffs, he didn't have a lot of passing game work, honestly. It's been mostly ground game. So, being able to get him back into that pass-catching back that we saw in Green Bay for so many years is the way that it feels like he'll find fantasy relevance in this one. I'm still starting Justin Jefferson for what it's worth, regardless of who they play against. I don't care what the situation is. But is there anyone else? Oh, by the way, I want to give you a shout out, Mike Clay. I feel like, I don't know if it was going into week 1 or if it was just one of the off seasons. You were like, hey, keep an eye on Jalen Naylor as a deep sleeper. Scored a touchdown in week 1.
And if Addison doesn't go in this one, he'll be busy too. They just like him. He was a guy that's just dealt with injuries, but he was a flyer, and they're like, oh, we got something here as like a potential number 3, and he looks. I mean, he was playing behind Brandon Powell for longer than I expected. But if Addison's out, he'll jump in there.
Yeah, Addison with an
spot.
ankle injury, not the same ankle, by the way.
Really?
I think everybody assumed he came in with an ankle. It was actually the opposite side. So I think that makes him more risky because now you're dealing with 2 ankles that are problematic.
Hey, Sam Darnold revenge game.
Sam
I didn't even think about that.
Oh,
Stop.
coming for upset in Minnesota, maybe.
That's not
his
a
old
bad
team.
thought. That's not a bad thought. Who you
Throw it to Jefferson 20 times. That's what we
Again, yes, we need the Cooper Cup.
That's how you get it done.
Yeah, I'm very much in on that. We're not starting Sam Darnold as a streamer in this one. Do you know where you have him ranked? Is he outside your top?
33rd out of 32.
Okay, all right.
No, we're not starting him against the Niners. I don't know. I feel like Minnesota has a history though of just pulling off these random upsets of really good teams. They did it to Buffalo a couple years ago, and they didn't have a chance. Maybe this is a trap game for your Niners.
Maybe.
Stop.
I know we only talked about the running backs in San Francisco, but we're starting Brandon Ayuk. We're starting Deebo Samuel. We're still starting George Kittle, especially at the tight end position. You're still starting George Kittle. Brandon Ayuk, he seems probably angry.
Talk about him a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay.
I got some
Foreshadowing.
thoughts.
All right. I love
Foreshadowing.
That. Love that.
The tease.
I got Brock Purdy too as a top 12 quarterback if you need him in this one, taking on a Vikings defense, someone that you could trust.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's pick this game, and I feel like this one is also going to go pretty quickly. I'm going to take the 49ers.
Wonder who I'm going to pick.
I
give
don't
me the
know.
Niners.
Again, trap game. Interesting. The Niners aren't going to win every game. Could this be one?
Are you sure about
So
that?
I'm going to go out on a limb here
Okay.
and take. No, I'm not. I'm going to take.
I'm going to take the San Francisco
I'm no
49ers.
fool.
That's
Come
what I
on.
I know. You'd be fine.
You know how high I was on the Jets this year. I still picked the Niners last week. I wasn't ready to jump in on the Jets just yet.
All right. We got more of our Week 2 recap coming up after this. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, and Mike Clay. Guys, Giants and Commanders. This doesn't seem like a fun football game. Can I just be honest? If I'm a Giants or Commanders fan, I'm sorry because both your teams started out a little bit rough on both sides. Let's start, though, with the Giants. Yeah, it was a little rough. It was pretty rough on both sides. I mean, Commanders had some things to be able to hang their hat on. Giants, not quite as much. Here's my question. Malik Neighbors. We were all super high. I was super high on Malik Neighbors coming in. And it felt like Daniel Jones just wasn't able to get him the ball. Maybe it's because he was throwing the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson too much. I don't know what that was all about, but do you think that we're able to see this Malik Neighbors resurgence that we kind of expected in week 1? Does he get the Wan'Dale Robinson treatment?
Yeah, look, everything that went poorly for them last week and all the concerns, and it's his Neighbors' first ever game, and Robinson had all these targets, and Malik Neighbors still had 66 yards. He was still productive. 7 targets, 5 catches, 66 yards. That's a perfectly solid stat line. Played 100% of the snaps in the game. So if you drafted Neighbors, you probably feel okay about that for his debut. And you also feel great about this matchup against Washington, who already had major cornerback concerns. And now Emmanuel Forbes is injured. So they're going further down the depth chart. He's set up for a huge week, too. If it doesn't happen in this matchup, I mean, what are they? What are they doing?
That is the question. Any concern about the knee that he's been dealing with?
Malik Neighbors, apparently it tightened up on him, had a little bit of stiffness at practice, so he's listed as limited Thursday. But Jordan Renan, who covers the team for us, made it seem as if this was not a huge concern.
Okay. Anyone else that you would want to start from this Giants team?
I was just going to say, obviously, again, the caveat, it's Friday morning. Check after Friday practice reports, but my assumption at this point is that Malik Neighbors will be fine.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily – there's no other lineup blocks. Wan'Dale Robinson's a guy I threw on my bench after Week 1 waivers. I mean, if someone has double-digit targets in Week 1, generally, you take a shot there. So he's on my bench. Devin Singletary, deep league flex. Otherwise, I think you're staying away. And keep an eye on Theo Johnson, though. Talked about tight ends been disappointing. He was a full-timer as a fourth-round rookie in Week 1. Just a name to you don't need to add him right now. But definitely a dynasty hold and a name to monitor.
Okay. What about with these Commanders? Obviously, Jaden Daniels looked absolutely fantastic. Oh, my gosh. We talked about it.
Fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, it was so just for fantasy. Yes, well, that's all that we're worried about here is fantasy football. So when you tell me that the quarterback gets multiple carries inside the 5-yard line, in spite of the fact that they've got Brian Robinson Jr. there, feels like it's set up. And they showed us this in the preseason. This is going to be a thing that this kid's going to do all season long, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. He was the only player in the NFL that had more than 2 carries inside the 5 in Week 1, and he delivered. Was it 16 carries in the game? Many of them designed runs. So he's on a path to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this season if he keeps this up, and he should keep it up this week again against the Giants. This is a really good matchup on both sides.
Any chance that when you're looking at these running backs, that Austin Ekeler has been able to move his way closer to the Brian Robinson territory? Or after what we saw in Week 1, are you still feeling like this is the Brian Robinson show in the backfield?
I mean, if you look at the usage, it was pretty much what we expected going into the season. It was 32 snaps for Robinson, 28 for Ekeler, 12 carries for Robinson, only 2 for Ekeler. I think maybe that gap could be a little closer, but it still should be a clear edge to Robinson, including near the goal line, 4 targets each. However, so again, that kind of checks out. We talked about how Ekeler is known as a really great pass catcher, which he is, but Robinson led the position in yards per target last year. He's effective in that area as well. Both of them were very productive. They combined for almost 150 yards, and Robinson scored the touchdown. So again, just one of the things we learn a lot in Week 1. In this situation, was basically just confirmation of what we thought was going to happen. I think a little foreshadowing. I think Washington will win this game. That's good for the game script for someone like Brian Robinson. I think he'll be busy in this one.
And you mentioned the carries for Jaden Daniels inside the 5. Him and Brian Robinson handled every single carry inside the 5-yard line. Austin Ekeler not a part of that. So
no surprise.
If Austin Ekeler is not getting passing game work, it's going to be tough to be able to keep his fantasy value up there for us if we need to start him this week. What about Terry McLaurin? Because he was a big disappointment, unfortunately. I was very excited to see what he could do, especially with it felt like no one else in this passing game that really has anywhere near the skill set that Scary Terry does. So my question is there a chance that you're still utilizing him as a flex play, or are we in the wait and see mode already on Terry McLaurin?
Wrong nickname, first of all.
You're right. It's F1. You're right. My bad.
Thank you. We kind of let that go by the wayside.
Yeah,
I still cringe back to when Matthew was here. Still cringe over that. So he played 82% of the snaps in this game. He's likely to draw the shadow from Deonte Banks, who struggled in Week 1. We're not afraid of that.
Yeah, wide receiver cornerback matchup.
Yeah, it's a plus matchup for McLaurin. So I think he'll get back on track. But we got to, come on. 4 targets in this game, unacceptable. I know that Daniels played well, and I'm still worried about all the scrambling and running and limiting the ceiling. But this should be a fast-paced offense as the season progresses, and they have to get more volume to their top receiver.
How often do guys end up on the shadow report where they're shadowing someone, but it's a positive matchup?
90% of the time, it's a negative.
Okay.
Or even like a little bit of a negative, but you're not too worried about it. But very rarely is it he's shadowing him the upgrade. That rarely happens.
That caught me off guard when I was reading through it this week because I actually do read your work. I promise.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Mike's kind of negative.
Yeah, well,
so
that's
shouldn't
the thing.
Surprise you.
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
Someone has to be, okay? It's like everyone likes betting overs and everyone wants to talk.
I think
only want to
everyone's
talk positives.
old and everyone's
Someone has to-
regressing.
Everyone
always
has to love each
regressing to
other.
the mean.
Let's be nice to ourselves.
You have to. You have to keep everybody on the even keel, right? That's my job around here.
All right, you already talked about it. You're taking the Washington Commanders in this one?
Yeah.
I'm also going to take the Commanders, Stephania.
Commanders.
All right.
I'm just trusting in Jaden Daniels here.
I think at this point, that's where we're at. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Bears-Texans. Stephania, first, before we get into anything else, Keenan Allen. Is there a chance he's going to be available in this one? He saw a healthy dosage of targets in Week 1.
He sure did, but he aggravated the heel injury that he came into last week's game with. Now, We had Courtney Cronin on Fantasy Football Now. She talked about how Keenan Allen was the favorite of Caleb Williams and that she expected him to be heavily involved, and he was until the heel issue, and then he went immediately over to the sideline. So it's a little concerning because, again, I mean, don't tell Mike, but Keenan Allen's 32. Yeah. And then on top of that with the heel injury, and he's so valuable that you don't want to risk trying to force him to play through something. I can tell you all about heel pain, so I can sympathize with Keenan Allen. But you also have Rome Odunze with a mild MCL sprain, which, although it's not considered to be a serious MCL injury, hasn't practiced yet this week, and it doesn't look like they're going to bring Rome Odunze out because, again, why would you risk that with a young star player? So then the question becomes, who are we putting in alongside DJ Moore? How did the names DeAndre Carter, Tyler Scott. Yeah.
More 12 personnel.
Those don't feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah, we talked about 12 personnel even yesterday, how Cole Kmet has had such a decreased value just after.
Yeah, I believe it was 18 routes for Gerald Everett, 11 for Kmet. They showed us that in the preseason. We were like, that can't be right. They're not really going to make Kmet the backup. He's not a backup, but he's the 1B for sure. Everett's the guy. So that was a surprise. I will say this, if you look at snap counts in week 1, DJ Moore 87%, full-timer, no surprise. Rome Odunze 77%, Keenan Allen 68%. Somewhat surprising that they
but
used
I think that was because.
Well, Allen was on the field the last pass play they ran in the game, so I don't know if he had that issue and then was kind of in and out. But Odunze beat up as well, so but Odunze's still playing 77% of the snaps, a really good sign long term. Right. So if he is a little beat up and his stock drops, or maybe in 10 teamers he gets dropped, a guy to keep on your benches. He was a top 10 pick at receiver. He's just superstar upside.
I have a lot of shares of Odunze. I'm very high on him.
Well, for what it's worth, just to make sure we close the book, on the Bears.
Put the bow on.
Yeah, whatever.
Close the book on.
Mixed metaphors, no big deal here.
Who cares?
We're talking about DJ Moore, still a top 25 wide receiver, in spite of how bad it felt like Caleb Williams looked. Obviously,
that was rough.
We'll see what happens with Keenan Allen and continue to monitor. I'm going to say this over and over, Fantasy Football Now on Sunday morning for all the latest updates. And then we'll see what happens with Rome Odunze. The only other guy that I would consider, and I don't know if I'm even considering him in this offense, would be DeAndre Swift. Part of what I feel like I need to see from them, taking on this Texans team, I know that the Bears' defense was really good against the Tennessee Titans. I do think the Houston Texans are a lot better than the Tennessee Titans. And so while I expect this still to be a rough one, potentially for the Chicago Bears, hopefully their defense can do some things. But I need to see DeAndre Swift get involved in the passing game.
Yeah. I'll say this. We know the Titans are dominant against running backs, so we talked about that with Swift last week, why we didn't like him. Texans, though, allowed the third fewest fantasy points to running backs in week 1, so they're off to a good start, to your point.
Third most.
Third fewest. Houston allowed the third fewest into running backs.
Got it.
They were playing the Jonathan Taylor, who they held in check in that game. But Swift plays 68% of the snaps. That's a really good number for a running back. Only 10 carries and 1 target. They just struggled to move the ball in that game. He was on the field for 58% of the he ran 58% of the routes. So he did a little pass blocking there as well. So that gives you some room for optimism. I'll tell you what, this is what gives me the most reason for optimism with DeAndre Swift. Their number 2 running back in the game, not Khalil Herbert, not Roshan Johnson, who was healthy scratch. Travis Homer.
Yeah.
And they mixed in Velus Jones, and Herbert played like 6 snaps. But the fact that Travis Homer beat those other guys out for the 2 job tells you that they have a 1. They have a number 1 running back. And again, he played almost 70% of the snaps. So it is Swift. I think that's going to be good for him as the season progresses. But I have him 28th in this matchup against Houston. Just that offense did really struggle last week. They got to get on track first.
Yeah, he got lucky, DeAndre Swift, to even get 5 fantasy points because he really only had 3, 30 rushing yards, and that's it because there was no passing game work. He got bailed out by a 2-point conversion just to bump you up to 5 fantasy points.
This is the Bears' offense really fascinating here because if you watch them, their preseason game where the ones were a full go and they were playing against backups. I think it was the Bengals backups they were facing, and they did not look good. They got it going like their last drive. I think they scored. It was like a long pass to Odunze. But I don't know. And then they come out like that in week 1. Maybe it might take a little time here for them to get rolling.
Yeah, it sort of feels like you're going to have up and downs with them. Like you might get these big spectacular drives, and then you're going to have some scares.
You can get that.
I am not. It's the Texans' defense is a little bit scary.
They are.
And so I'm not counting on huge things for them offensively with the Bears, and they're dealing with 2 receivers who are potentially out, at least banged up.
Yeah. I'm not thrilled with the scary berries for this one. I am going to take the Houston Texans.
I do not like that.
Oh, come on, guys. I'm trying here. No?
I don't know. That's just
that was
makes me
just as good as Mike's watch joke on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday.
That's not a high bar, apparently, because no one don't like that except for like 3 people on Twitter.
You aim higher, Daniel.
I love it.
I've taken the Texans.
Also taking the Texans. Mike?
Yeah, Texans, yeah.
Okay. Let's talk Saints and Cowboys. Stephania, we're going to lead off with Jake Ferguson because we just desperately need tight ends to do anything for us in fantasy football so far this year. Is there a chance that we're going to have Jake Ferguson out there after what he went through in week 1?
I mean, there is a chance, and this is pretty remarkable when you think about what the injury looked like. This was one where it just looked so awkward and uncomfortable. Came down kind of stiff-legged, but bobbled his knee, and there were some real concerns that he might have torn his ACL. But upon evaluation, he had an MCL injury and a bone bruise. Those often accompany each other. You get bone bruises when the joint kind of moves excessively, and the femur and the tibia kind of knock together, and that creates a bruising. But he was out and doing rehab work with his knee taped and looked pretty good to the folks who were there watching him do the workouts on the ground. So I think the door is open for Jake Ferguson. I'd be a little bit concerned about just how he is mobility-wise and first game back. I don't know that I'd expect huge things, but we'll see. I'm very curious to see what the Friday practice vibe is if he gets into practice, what he's able to do, and sort of the chatter around Dallas if they think he's able to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have that if he does. If not, Luke Schoonmaker, probably not a guy that we're looking at here in fantasy this week, looking at other options potentially instead.
No, we have other options at tight end. Fun name to say, though.
Yeah, I agree.
I hope he's great. He's no Cole Fotheringham, but
well, you're not wrong. Not wrong.
but we'll see.
We're going to have both of these Cowboys running backs outside our top 30, if I can help it, not starting either one of them against the Saints defense. It's really just CeeDee Lamb that I'm trusting here from Dallas. On the other side, though, I need to ask you how you're talking and how you're not talking, how you're looking at these Saints wide receivers and pass catchers, because against the Carolina Panthers, it's like it felt like they just sort of found a little bit of everyone except for the one guy that we wanted, whose name is Chris Stinkin' Olave. We hardly saw him at all in week 1. So are you in on Rashid Shaheed, or do you believe that he's going to be one of these, like what we saw in week 1 is going to be Shaheed? He's a boom-bust kind of guy that's going to stretch the field, but he's just not going to have the same kind of floor play, even though we didn't see it from Chris Olave, that Olave is going to be able to bring.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he played 66% of the snaps, and remember, they were able to rest some guys a little bit late in that game because they were blowing out the Panthers. So 4 targets, 3 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown. They are going up against Dallas. If Dallas, and I'm going to talk about this a little later, but if they do shadow in this game, it would be Diggs on Chris Olave. I don't think they're going to do that, though. And remember, Deron Bland is out right now. He's on IR, and they have a rookie. Again, I'm going to talk more about this later, but that opens the door for Shaheed to have a big game here. So, yeah, I mean, he's promoted. He's a full-timer now. He probably will, to some extent, be boom-bust, but you feel better about it with no Michael Thomas there. He's in the lineup. He's a big part of this offense. I have him wide receiver 36 prior to TNF, so he's certainly a fringe wide receiver 3.
Yeah, and we're preaching patience on Chris Olave. Still have him as a starter, given everything that he brings to the table. And I think that the Cowboys, I still expect them, spoiler alert, to win this game. So if they're going to score a bunch of points, I'm hoping that Chris Olave gets more involved.
That's a good point. Game script.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, again, I'm going to talk about that more soon.
All right, I'm going to take Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas.
Cowboys.
All right. When we come back, we got more of our Week 2 preview coming up. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, Mike Clay, making our way through our Week 2 preview. We are talking Raiders and Ravens. I am so excited to potentially start 3 tight ends from one matchup. When was the last time we were able to start 3 tight ends from one matchup?
Over 10 years ago, probably.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah,
you didn't have any salt and pepper in your beard when we were able to
I
do
did
that.
not. I don't even know if I was working here yet.
Yes. So how are you going to approach these tight ends? We've talked about it a couple times over the course of this week, Mike. Not everyone listens to every episode, though, so I want to go back and do it again. We got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, both of whom we expect to be involved. But how are you breaking down this tight end tie in Baltimore?
Yeah, so the way I have it ranked in 12-team leagues, we are starting all 3 of these guys. In 10-team leagues, it's more borderline. Mark Andrews is the top option. Look, he's been a top 5 scorer each of the last 5 seasons. He may have been a little bit limited in the passing game. He was doubled, I believe. Again, I mentioned this earlier in the week. Nate Yonke from PFF, I believe, had the stat where he was doubled more than he's ever been in his career, certainly more than he was at all last season. You would expect coverages and schemes to change against him going forward. So still sticking with Mark Andrews. Next in line for me would be Brock Bowers. Played 68% of the snaps last week. Led the team with 8 targets, put up 58 yards in that game. His 11.8 fantasy points last week, not a big number. Third most among tight ends in week 1, which shows you the state of that position through 1 week. Also, Baltimore actually led the third most of tight ends last week because Kansas City had a bunch of balls go to their reserve tight ends as well in that one. And then third would be Isaiah Likely, of course, had the huge game last week, but he did play fewer snaps and run fewer routes than Mark Andrews. And again, there was some element of the scheme affecting Likely in that game. So that's my order. But again, I have them all in my top 11, actually.
I can't believe that.
I was going to say the good news on Brock Bowers, number one, we got utilization out of him that sort of made us feel better about Brock Bowers.
And he wasn't even fully healthy going into that game, too.
And
he missed a lot of
but
time.
he comes out of that game no worse for the wear, full practices both days, even though he still is on the injury report. So you just feel better about his health going into this game.
All right, so then I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, Mike. I've got Isaiah Likely ahead of Brock Bowers just by a little bit. You've got Brock Bowers ahead of Isaiah Likely. Let's do another board bet, a week 2 board bet. Are you okay with that?
Okay, I'm fine with it. I feel like, they're back-to-back, so it's a toss-up, but I will
already hedging. Already
I already said yes, so I'm in.
All right, I say Isaiah Likely will outscore Brock Bowers in week 2 against in week 2 in fantasy football. I don't know.
Great job, you nailed that.
I
You're off to a great
crushed
start.
it. Thanks.
I say Brock Bowers will outscore Isaiah Likely in week 2.
Put it on the board.
board.
I'm in a spot where I love getting the drop in
You
there.
know what? I'm going to say Mark Andrews outscores both of them.
Okay, Stephania.
We all agree with that. Yeah, I was trying to think what could you.
I just went out on a limb right there. See what I did?
If
I've
they're
gotta make a
both
decision.
outside the top 20, Stephania wins or something like
Yeah,
that.
there we go. There we go. Would you start in Scott Fishbowl Isaiah Likely or J.K. Dobbins? Tight end premium. I got to make.
Oh, I don't know.
I'd
I'd have to.
Ooh,
I
that's
can't-
it.
All my leagues have different scoring. I'm like,
I
oh
know.
no, what is?
Like,
No,
hold
you
on,
have
my
to
brain has to recompute everything.
Any of them are turners. You have to go through all the things.
I
Those
feel like
two
I
are
needed to
not.
say positive things about Isaiah Likely because I'm starting J.K. Dobbins over him right now.
Well, I know, but the Dobbins faces the Panthers.
Yeah, well, I'll talk
Such a
about
good-
him a little bit
Okay.
later in the
Such a
show,
good
too. What are we doing with Zamir White? Mike, hold
Very
on.
worried.
I got some stats here on Zamir White. I'm sure you got a bunch of them, too.
I
13
sure do.
rushes, 44 yards, 1 fumble, 2 receptions, and 2 receiving yards. But Alexander Madison played 60% of the snaps, just 38% for Zamir White. Are we already at a point where we've seen a changing of the guard and this is more of a committee than we thought it was going to be?
Yeah, we absolutely are. There was a lot of. He was very popular topic leading up to the season. Like, he's not in the dead zone. This isn't a dead zone running back. It's absolutely a dead zone running back when he hasn't done it before, and where he was being drafted. And we saw that play out in week 1 because we didn't expect Alexander Madison to play that much. He's our primary pass catching running back for a team we think is going to be at 500 at best this year. They're going to be trailing a lot. You're right. 12 more snaps by Madison than White. White was still the primary ball carrier. 13-5 was the edge there. Madison had 6 targets, only 2 for Zamir White. The routes aligned with that, only 9 routes for Zamir White, 20 for Madison. So it definitely told us that when they're throwing the football, it's going to be the Madison show. Now, White still did have 15 touches. That's generally going to be enough to be a flex option, but his value certainly dropped. And they're playing in Baltimore. They're going to be underdogs. They are underdogs in this game, which means we expect them to throw the football quite a bit. By the way, the Ravens last week held Isaiah Pacheco and the Chiefs running backs to 2.8 yards per carry. That was lowest in the NFL. So tough matchup for White on top of everything else. I'm very worried about him.
Yeah, I don't love any of that. I don't love any of the things that you just said because I have enough Zamir White as a hero RB2 that I waited on. And it doesn't feel good watching this happen. We kind of talked about how it kind of felt like this could be the Alexander Madison of 2024 when he, you didn't see him a lot, still drafted him to be the guy, and then already here in week 2 we've lowered expectations on him. So.
Yeah, and it's probably even worse than that because Madison was still getting the rep. Like, he was still getting more run than this. Madison has just clearly taken control of the passing down work. I'd feel better about White if they were a better team and we thought they were going to win 10, 11, 12 games, but I don't know. It might be a game script thing, how good you feel about him.
That's a good point. All right, I'm going to take the Ravens in this one.
Hot take.
Tanya?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, brave.
Yeah.
I'm taking the
Could this also be a trap? No.
No,
Ravens.
not this one. Not this one.
Can't even joke about that one.
All right, let's talk Falcons and Eagles. Mike, we don't really need to say anything about your Eagles because you're starting all of them.
Yeah, they're an easy one. Very top heavy, which is somewhat scary, but as long as they're healthy, we're good.
Yeah, you're starting your quarterback, starting your running back, starting both your wide receivers. You could potentially even start Dallas Goedert in this one. The real question is on the other side, Stephania Bell. Obviously, we're rolling out there with Bijan Robinson. There's no question about starting Bijan. But what are you doing with both of these pass catchers and Drake London and Kyle Pitts? How are you feeling about them in this one?
Well, I'm feeling about them. It depends how I feel about Kirk Cousins, because I think to me this is a game that's probably one of my most anticipated to watch because I want to see what the Atlanta offense looks like. I'm almost prepared to just take that one game as sort of an aberration on the season because I don't believe that the script will be exactly the same in terms of how Kirk Cousins operates. We saw him in shotgun or pistol virtually the entire time, not under center. I have noticed video being posted of practice this week of Kirk Cousins operating under center. And everybody's looking at like, how's he moving? Kirk Cousins was on the Rich Eisen show, and he asked him directly about his ankle and his Achilles and how he felt. And he said it felt great. And it felt, a little bit of post-game soreness that you would expect, just like anything with your first game back. But he really was not thinking about it at all. And it had me wondering, was the function of this offense built around, we never saw Kirk Cousins in the preseason? Are we just trying to be extra careful and set this up to just kind of give him that space in the first game? And the reason all that matters so much is I think everything was telegraphed to the defense. And so it sets up, to me, like if that was going to be the case again, I'd be really worried about the pass catchers. If he's operating the way we've seen Kirk Cousins operate in the past, like when he was at Minnesota, then I think that becomes a little bit more interesting. And then maybe I have a little bit more confidence in Drake London. Kyle Pitts to get a touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we at least know he's looking his way.
Yep.
And they are scheming it up for him to potentially be an end zone target.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to project what I expect for them until I see what the offense looks like.
Kyle Pitts is an obvious starter for me, Mike. What about Drake London?
Yeah, same thing. He had a dud week 1, but he was shadowed by Joey Porter Jr. We downgraded him last week for that matchup. We expect better things here against this Eagles secondary. They're going to have to throw it a lot. The only thing we want, and maybe this is just because Arthur Smith was in the house for this, but the only player with more than 5 targets for the Falcons was Ray McLeod. You got to stop that, okay? He should have 3 targets. Let's get the ball to Drake London and more to Kyle Pitts. And Bijan was great. I mean, he had a ton of volume played. But London, Pitts, Bijan played almost every snap. I mean, it's all systems.
Ray McLeod and Wan'Dale Robinson, 2 guys that shouldn't have had all the targets today.
What?
About London.
No. I'm not worried. No.
Okay.
Taking the Eagles or the Falcons? We're all taking the Eagles.
Eagles.
We'll be back here with a little bit more on Fantasy Focus in just a minute. Back here on Fantasy Focus, closing things out, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, Mike Clay. Guys, we got some starts of the week. This is one of my favorite things that we do, trying to figure out which guys we want to plant our flag on.
Somebody crushed it
Well,
on this group, and it wasn't me.
I think, did I say Jaden Reed week 1?
I think you did.
They do?
Did. Was he, what was he, wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1?
He was up there. He was terrific.
I think Cooper Kupp might have had more fantasy.
You would read. Yeah, we had a good week. I had Kamara.
Yeah, you had Kamara.
Yeah.
I mean, I had Jonathan Taylor.
Oh, okay.
That's not your
That's a
fault.
tough one.
I know.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah. All right, well, let's start with you.
Well,
then.
Field had Caleb Williams, so it could be worse.
Oh, yeah, not Field at least. There you go.
Caleb
Oh, so
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I love you, Field.
You know the Field is watching this. So
I know.
I feel bad about that. Stephania, let's start with you. If you're going to pick one person you're planting your flag on this week, who's it going to be?
Yeah, so if I'm going outside, the obvious top 10. So I went with Brandon Ayuk. And I think because he had such a dud in week 1, he was not happy with how he looked in week 1. I think it maybe surprised him a little bit just how that rust felt. He came to the sideline. He had that obvious drop, where that would have been a touchdown if Brandon Ayuk catches that. And I think he wants that back. I think he wants to prove himself this week against Minnesota. I think they're going to have to pay attention to so many other pieces that it's going to open the door for Brandon Ayuk. I think this is a bounce back to what we saw last season game for him.
I feel like all of America had the same response when he had that drop. Man, that's a tough catch, but when you get paid $30 million a year, we expect you to come up with it, right?
Only played 60% of the snaps last year, 83%, and that's a couple games where he rested late. So, I mean, he was clearly limited.
Yeah, should be a nice bounce back in this one. Mike, who are you taking here?
Yeah, Chris Olave is my guy. I foreshadowed a
you
little
said
bit
that.
earlier. Dud in week number 1, but he was on the field for 23 of the 25 pass plays they ran when Carr was on the field. So we feel good about that. Only 2 targets in the game. That's a career low. He averaged 8.8 last year. So that's more where he's going to be. We know that. He's been doing that since he's been in the NFL. And also, the Cowboys shut down the Browns wide receivers in week 1, but the game script should favor Olave in this one. They should be throwing a lot. And do either of you know who Kalen Carson is?
Kalen Carson.
Yeah, he's a 5th-round rookie for Dallas, for Dallas, who's starting with Deron Bland out on the other side. And you expect if Diggs doesn't shadow Olave, him to be up against him quite a bit. In fact, last week, Chris Olave was on Carson's side of the field 47% of the time. Dallas also allowed the 6th most fantasy points in week 1 to Carson's side of the field. So this could potentially set up for Olave to beat him a few times and put up some big plays. So there's a lot there from a matchup sort of standpoint, but I think Olave, big rebound this week.
I love that. I love that, and would
We're
love
deep
to
into the weeds there, but
I know,
Yeah.
no, that's why we have you here to tell us these things.
That's true.
not for my dad jokes.
No, it's not. It's not for that.
Yeah.
My start of the week is going to be J.K. Dobbins. I talked about him a little bit yesterday. I've moved him inside my top 20, and everything that he did in week 1 was fantastic. 13 touches, 139 yards, and a touchdown. You saw
Got a
him break off
game
those.
ball.
He did get a game ball. And those 2 big 60-yard runs is where it's at. He was more involved in the passing game than Gus Edwards was, and taking on this Panthers defense that was just eviscerated.
Yeah, 35 fantasy points.
It was really tough, and now without Derek Brown, I feel like it's even going to be worse. So I am all in on J.K. Dobbins this week.
Plus, if he had any doubts, sometimes guys need to prove for themselves. They can
Yeah.
talk up a good game about how they feel, but then when they go out and prove it, that does wonders for the confidence. I think it's all systems go
Seeing him
for
get into that game action, come out healthy, feel good about it. Yeah, building that confidence for week 2 is more of what.
No doubt about who's the 1A.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he just leads the NFL in yards per carry since he entered the league, so no big deal. Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching Fantasy Focus Football presented by NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. We love you guys so much. Remember, Fantasy Football now, Sunday morning. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. We'll see you on Sunday.
Fantasy, you're in the 06.